Let me tell you about a pattern that should not exist. Every year, millions of people visit Thailand, Japan, Singapore, Bali. They come back once, maybe twice, then they move on. That's how tourism works. You go, you see, you leave. But there is one country in Southeast Asia where something different keeps happening. People arrive for a week. They stay for a month. They go home. And then, they come back. Not because of a landmark they missed. Not because of a deal they found. Because of something they felt. Something they've been trying to recreate ever since they left. I've been chasing that answer for 2 years. I talked to dozens of repeat visitors. I spent weeks inside this country, not as a tourist, as a witness. And what I found? It will completely change the way you think about travel. This is Malaysia. And nobody has told you the real story yet. If you love exploring Malaysia with us, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Your support keeps us uncovering these fascinating stories for you. Subscribe right now, hit the bell, because this one goes somewhere most travel content doesn't have the guts to go. Start with the numbers, because the numbers are strange. Malaysia doesn't have the marketing budget of Thailand. It doesn't have the global mythology of Japan. It doesn't have the luxury infrastructure of Singapore. And yet, repeat visitor rates for Malaysia consistently outperform all three. Why? I spoke to a woman from Sydney who booked 8 days in Kuala Lumpur. She cancelled her flight home, rebooked 3 weeks later, then came back 6 months after that. I spoke to a retired teacher from the Netherlands who has spent part of every single year for the last 7 years in Penang. When I asked him why, he went quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's the only place I've ever been where I stopped counting the days." I asked a group of Malaysian Chinese cousins in Georgetown why they thought foreigners kept returning. One of them laughed and said, "Because we never asked them to leave." That was a joke. But it was also exactly the answer. And here is where the comparison with other countries gets brutal. Thailand is extraordinary. But here's the thing nobody says out loud. Most visitors to Thailand experience a version of Thailand that was built for them. The full moon party. The elephant sanctuary. The rooftop bar frames the temple at golden hour. All of it, beautiful, deliberate, positioned. Positioned at exactly the right distance to feel real without ever being real. Japan, a masterpiece. Precision, grace, depth. But Japan keeps you outside it. Not coldly, warmly, but structured warmth. The hospitality is genuine, and it will never, ever let you forget that you are a guest. Singapore delivers everything it promises, but it never stops performing. The city is always on duty. And after 3 days, so are you. Now, Malaysia. Malaysia is not managing your experience of it. And that one thing, turns out to be the most important thing. The Mamak stall is open at 2 a.m. because Malaysians eat at 2 a.m. Not because tourists do. The hawker center operates the way it does because the same community has been eating there for 30 years, and you just happen to find it. The festival happening this weekend is not a cultural showcase. It is the actual festival of the actual community that you are now somehow standing inside of. When you arrive into something that doesn't need you to exist, something shifts. You stop being a consumer of experiences. You start being a participant in a place. And that shift? That is the thing nobody prepares you for. I want to tell you about a specific night. 11:30 p.m. Wednesday. A plastic table under fluorescent lights at a Mamak stall somewhere in Kuala Lumpur. Ceiling fan. Teh tarik arrived before I finished ordering it. 3 conversations happening simultaneously in at least 2 languages around me. I had been in the city for 5 days. I was tired in the way of someone who has been consuming experiences rather than having them. And then, the group at the table next to me pulled my chair into their circle. No invitation. No introduction. No explanation. Just room made. Like including a stranger was simply the obvious response to someone sitting alone nearby. I sat with those people for 2.5 hours. There was a man named Hafiz who ran a printing business 2 streets away and came to this specific stall every single Wednesday, because the roti canai was, in his words, the correct roti canai. They argued about football. They debated whose mother made better curry. They asked me where I was from with a quality of curiosity that meant they actually wanted to know. And when I left, they told me to come back. Not the way you say come back when you mean nothing by it. The way you say it when you mean, Thursday if you're free. That was not a curated experience. That was not designed for tourists. That was just a Wednesday in Malaysia. If this is already making you rethink something, you're in the right place. Subscribe right now. New documentary every week. The next one is already being built. Here is the thing about Malaysia that the world genuinely does not talk about enough. Malay, Chinese, Indian, dozens of indigenous communities. Sharing the same geography, not for decades, for centuries. Most people know this as a fact. What most people don't know is what centuries of actual coexistence produces at the level of daily human interaction. It produces a population that is fluent in difference, not tolerant of difference, the way newer multicultural societies practice tolerance carefully, deliberately, with visible effort. Fluent. Comfortable with it the way you're comfortable with something you grew up inside of and never had to consciously think about. The colleagues switched between 3 languages mid-sentence, without pausing. The neighborhood where a mosque, a temple, a church, and a Hindu shrine sit within walking distance. And the only remarkable thing to anyone who lives there is that you're asking about it. The festival that everyone joins, regardless of whether it's their tradition, because that is simply what people here do when someone nearby is celebrating. For people arriving from societies where diversity is still being negotiated loudly and painfully, arriving into a place where difference has already been lived with long enough to become ordinary, it feels like rest. A specific kind of rest that comes from not having to navigate the ambient tension that diversity produces in places, still figuring it out. That feeling is not incidental. That feeling is the reason the Dutch teacher comes back every year. That feeling is the reason people who arrive for a week leave 3 months later. Malaysia has a word that doesn't translate into English cleanly. Lipak. It means something like being present with people, without an agenda. Sitting somewhere. Eating something. Talking about nothing in particular. For no reason other than the food is good, the company is there, and the night hasn't run out yet. In most high-performance cultures, lipak is called wasting time. In Malaysia, lipak is considered a normal and important feature of a life being lived well. Now think about where most people are coming from when they land in Kuala Lumpur. Cities where rest has to be earned. Where connection has to be scheduled. Where the meal is something you consume efficiently rather than something you experience without a clock running. When people from those places encounter a daily life that does not operate on those terms, something opens in them that they did not know was closed. And that opening, that is the thing they keep coming back for. Not consciously. Not with a plan. The way you return to anywhere that gives you something you didn't know you needed. Let me ask you something directly. When was the last time you were somewhere that made you feel like your presence required no justification? Not welcomed in the tourist sense. Not accommodated. Just included, without a transaction underneath it. That is what Malaysia does. Not because it designed that experience. Because the culture that produced it was never built around the idea that human presence needed to justify itself before it could be made comfortable. That is the secret. Not a landmark. Not a price tag. The almost embarrassingly simple fact that Malaysia makes you feel like you are supposed to be there. And once you feel that, you understand everything. You understand why people come back. Not to see something they missed, but to feel something they have been missing ever since they left. If Malaysia ever gave you something you weren't expecting, I want the specific moment in the comments. Not a general impression. The exact conversation. The meal. The stranger. The night that went longer than planned because nobody wanted it to end. Those stories are the real truth of this country. And if you haven't been yet, after this video, you're running out of convincing reasons. Subscribe to Beyond Surface. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who has been to Malaysia. They'll know exactly what I'm describing from the first 10 seconds. The next documentary is already being made. See you there.